I got fired in a conference room that still had leftover Christmas candy in a glass bowl. Not the dramatic kind of firing. No raised voices, no slammed doors. Just a calendar invite called Quick Sync, and a manager who wouldn't look me in the eye. It was a Tuesday, late morning, the kind of day where everyone pretends they're busy, but really they're waiting for lunch. I'd just finished stand-up. My team had been talking about a payment latency issue from the night before, and I remember saying, "I'll review the traces after this." Because that's what I always said. I was the person who stayed when something broke. Then my manager, Trent, messaged me. "Room B, now." No agenda, no context. That was the first sign. When people want to do something dirty, they stop leaving paper. I walked to conference room B with my coffee still hot. The hallway smelled like printer toner and the lemon cleaner the janitor used every morning. I was already rehearsing the conversation in my head, trying to guess which project I was about to inherit. The door was half closed. Inside, Trent, sitting. HR, standing with a folder. A third chair pulled out like they'd planned where my body would go before I even arrived. The HR partner introduced herself like we hadn't met. Melissa, calm voice, neutral face, the kind of person trained to say harmful things softly. "Ethan," she said, "thank you for joining on short notice." That phrase always means you're not leaving with the same life you walked in with. Trent folded his hands and stared at the table. He didn't do the usual manager theater. No fake regret. No, "this is hard for me too." Just the blank posture of a man who'd already moved on. Melissa slid the folder toward me. "This is regarding a workforce reduction," she said. "Your role is being eliminated effective today." My brain did something strange in that moment. It didn't panic. It didn't even get sad yet. It started checking details like a bug report. Workforce reduction. Role eliminated. Effective today. I waited for the rest. Melissa kept talking, reading from a page like it was a script. Severance terms. Benefit end dates. A sentence about performance alignment that didn't match any review I'd ever had. I'd been rated strong. I'd shipped the payments, orchestrator, rewrite 3 months earlier. I'd fixed the incident that saved a partner contract last quarter. I'd trained 2 new hires who were still asking me where the runbooks were. Trent finally spoke. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's a business decision." I looked at him and let the silence stretch long enough to force him to add something. He didn't. So I asked one question, steady. "Why me?" Melissa answered before Trent could. "We're not in a position to discuss details," she said. "The decision has been finalized." Finalized. Like I was a number they'd already moved from one column to another. I stared at the folder again. My name printed on top. A place for my signature. A clause about returning property. A paragraph about confidentiality and non-disparagement, written like they expected me to be noisy. I didn't sign. Not because I wanted to fight in that moment, because I knew the trick. If you sign under pressure, later they say it was mutual. Voluntary. Agreed. Melissa's voice stayed smooth. "Security will assist you in collecting your personal items." That was it. No goodbye. No thank you. Just an escort like I was a risk. I stood up slowly because moving too fast would make it feel real. Trent stayed seated the whole time. That detail stuck with me. He didn't even have the courtesy to stand while cutting me loose from a company I'd kept running at 2 in the morning. In the hallway, a security guard met me near my desk. He wasn't aggressive. He looked uncomfortable, like he wished he was doing literally anything else. That almost made it worse. When cruelty is routine, it becomes easier for everyone. My coworkers didn't look up. They stared at their monitors with the intensity of people trying not to be witnesses. Slack pings chimed. Someone laughed quietly at something on their screen. Life continuing in place while mine got erased. I sat down at my desk, hands moving on autopilot. Notebook, backpack. The small framed photo I kept face down because I didn't like explaining it. Charger, hoodie. I avoided the drawers that held work notes. Those weren't mine, even if I wrote them. I kept my face neutral. That was important. If you look like a victim, people file you away as weak. If you look angry, they call you unstable. The only safe expression in a corporate firing is calm. As I zipped my backpack, my laptop screen blinked. I didn't touch anything. The cursor froze. Then the login window popped up. Your session has expired. I watched it like it was a heartbeat stopping. That was the moment it hit my stomach. Not the HR words, not Trent's blank stare, the lockout. Because a lockout doesn't just remove access. It announces that you are no longer considered trustworthy. I stood up with my backpack and looked around one last time. My team's whiteboard still had our weekly priorities written in marker. My name was on 2 of the tasks. Security walked me to the elevator. Trent followed a few steps behind like a man shadowing his own decision. At the lobby, he finally said something that sounded like he thought it would make him a good person. You know, this isn't about you. I looked at him. If it's not about me, I said, then it should be easy for you to explain. He didn't answer. He just nodded like the conversation was over. Outside, the cold air felt honest, the kind of honest the office never was. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long minute. My hands were steady. My thoughts weren't. I kept replaying the morning, looking for the moment where this became inevitable, the moment I missed. Then my phone buzzed, an alert email, not from HR, not from a friend, an automated on-call notification. Critical, payment gateway latency above threshold. I frowned and refreshed. Another came in. Incident. Orchestrator retries spiking. I stared at the subject lines like they were addressed to the wrong person. Then a third email hit my personal inbox. One of the engineering distribution lists was still forwarding to it from years ago. I'd never bothered to remove it because it was convenient when I was traveling. The email was a system-generated assignment. Owner, Ethan Cole. My chest tightened. They had cut my access and walked me out, but the company's incident routing still thought I was responsible. At first, I told myself it was just sloppy offboarding. Someone forgot to remove me from a list. It happens. Companies are messy. Then another email arrived. This one wasn't an alert. It was a report. Subject: Regulated Service Ownership Map. It was a weekly export that got automatically attached to our compliance binder. Most people ignored it. I couldn't. I helped build the pipeline that generated it. Because auditors don't care about excuses. They care about names, dates, and accountability. I opened the attachment. There it was, in plain text. Payments Orchestrator. Service Owner, Ethan Cole. Escalation Contact, Ethan Cole. Primary Incident Commander, Ethan Cole. No former, no terminated, no role eliminated, just my name, sitting inside a regulated systems official paperwork like a loaded gun pointed at my future. I scrolled further down, hoping to see an update, a replacement, anything that proved this was a simple delay. Nothing. And then I saw the timestamp. The report had been generated after my meeting started, which meant one thing. They fired me in a room with HR, but the systems that mattered still pointed straight back to my name. I didn't know it yet, but that was the part that could ruin me. Because if something broke, if money vanished, if an auditor asked who owned the most sensitive service in the company, the answer would still be me. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. I sat in my car staring at the ownership report until my coffee went cold in the cup holder. My first instinct wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger. It was the same instinct I'd had every time production lit up at 2 a.m. Contain the risk. Because my name sitting on a regulated service wasn't just embarrassing. It was liability. The kind that doesn't care about HR paperwork. I opened my email again. Another alert hit. SIV2? Ledger reconciliation delay. That one made my stomach tighten, because the ledger wasn't some internal toy. It touched customer balances. It touched reporting. It touched the part of the company regulators love to ask about. and it was still pointing to me. I started to type a message to my old team in Slack without thinking. Then I remembered the lockout. No access, no voice, no way to even warn them directly without it looking like I was trying to reinsert myself after termination. So I did the only thing that made sense. I documented. At home, I put the severance folder on my kitchen table like it was contaminated and opened my personal laptop. I created a folder called Timeline. Not evidence, not revenge. Timeline. The word itself forced me to be factual. I dragged in the emails, the ownership report, the on-call notifications. I took screenshots of the timestamps with the system clock visible. I forwarded everything to an archive mailbox I'd had since college. Old habit, the kind you build when you've seen what accidents look like in corporate systems. Then I thought about the ownership map itself. That report didn't come from nowhere. It was generated from a configuration file, a small JSON document inside our internal governance repo. It fed a dozen systems, paging, runbooks, escalation matrices, compliance binder exports. We built it after a vendor audit hammered us for unclear accountability. It was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario, and I knew something else too. If my name was still there, it wasn't because no one could change it. It was because someone didn't want to. I checked my phone again. A message from Trent. Need you to hop on a quick call. Urgent. No apology. No, are you okay? Just urgency, like my employment status was a technical glitch he expected me to fix. I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, a different email came in. This one from HR, sent to my personal address. Subject, offboarding clarification. The body was short, almost comically careful. Please confirm you will not access any company systems following termination and that you will immediately cease all work on company codebases. I read it twice, and then a very cold thought formed. They were building a paper trail. They wanted me to sign a statement that I wouldn't access systems I no longer had access to, while their own governance artifacts still listed me as responsible owner. If something exploded, they could point to the binder and say he owned it. Then they could point to my email and say he promised not to touch anything. And the implied question would hang in the air like smoke. So why didn't he fix it? I realized I'd been saving people who never wanted saving. I closed the email and didn't respond yet. I called the one person I trusted to talk like an adult, Carla from compliance. I had her number because in fintech you don't fight compliance forever. Eventually you learn you need them when the heat comes. She answered on the second ring, and her first words told me everything. Ethan, I'm not supposed to call you, she said. Then don't, I replied. Email me. What's going on? Her breath caught. Your name is still on the ownership map. I know. It's worse than that, she said, voice low. The audit firm asked for named owners on the payments orchestrator and the customer ledger. They pulled the report this afternoon. It printed your name. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. They fired me at 11, I said. My access was revoked before the meeting ended. I was told you'd help with transition, she said, and I heard the disgust in her tone. Like that excuses leaving you listed as accountable? Carla, I said carefully, I'm not helping with anything. But I need you to understand something. If my name is on a regulated service after termination, that's not a mistake. That's a decision. Silence. Then she said, Do you have proof you lost access? Yes, I said. Lockout timestamp. SSO session termination. The ownership report timestamp. And I may have more if I can see the audit trail. There was a pause, and then Carla's voice sharpened in a way I'd only heard when she was dealing with a real risk. Don't log into anything, she said. Don't touch any system. I can't, I said. I'm locked out. I mean, don't try, she replied. Because they'll turn it into a story. They'll say you accessed systems post-termination. They'll say you sabotaged. They'll do anything to move responsibility off the people who authorized this. That was the moment I understood the shape of what was happening. This wasn't just an offboarding oversight. This was positioning. I ended the call and finally replied to HR. One sentence. I have no access to company systems as of my termination meeting today, and will communicate only in writing regarding any further requests. Then I stopped. I didn't add emotion. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain. Because in corporate fights, the first person to sound emotional becomes the problem. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go. A voicemail landed, then another. I didn't listen yet. I saved them. Instead, I opened something I still had access to by design, the audit portal. A year earlier, after a near miss with a third-party vendor, I'd pushed for a separate governance logging system, not tied to our single sign-on, not administered by engineering management. It lived under a compliance-owned contract, with its own identity provider. People had mocked it as overkill. Compliance loved it. I logged in with my personal credentials. It loaded immediately. If you've never seen an audit log built for real accountability, it's almost unsettling. It doesn't just show events, it shows intent. Who touched what? When? From where? And in some cases, who approved it? I searched for the ownership map file. A timeline appeared 3 weeks ago. Workforce planning doc created. Author Trent. 2 weeks ago. Role elimination ticket open. Author HR. 9 days ago. Repository admin access requested. Requester. Director of Engineering Ops. And then the entry that made my throat go dry. Late last night, after midnight, the ownership map file was edited. My name was still listed as owner, but my corporate email was removed. It was like someone had carefully cut the wire that would route alerts to me, while keeping my label on the service. A perfect setup. If something broke, they could say I was responsible, while ensuring I couldn't respond fast enough to protect myself. That's not incompetence. That's strategy. I zoomed in, I took screenshots, I exported the log entry. I saved the hash the portal generated to prove it hadn't been altered. I didn't even blink. It felt like responding to an incident, except this incident was my life. Then I scrolled down and saw the modified by field. It wasn't Trent's individual account. It was the emergency change account. Break glass. The account we only used in live production emergencies, the one guarded by a 2 approval rule, the one that was supposed to require a security approver and an engineering approver every time it was unlocked. Why would break glass be used to edit ownership labels unless someone wanted plausible deniability, unless someone wanted to say later, it was an emergency, we had to do it quickly, and bury the real motive under urgency? My phone vibrated again. A new email. From Trent this time, sent from his personal device. Ethan, we're getting questions. Just confirm you didn't touch anything. Also, can you tell us who owns the ledger now? I can't find it. I read that last sentence twice. He can't find the owner because he'd been treating the ownership map like a checkbox, not a governance control. He didn't know because he never cared. And now he wanted me to patch his ignorance in writing, right after firing me. But that was just the beginning, because the audit log also showed who approved break glass access. 2 approvals: engineering approver, Trent Halloway, security approver, Vince Larkin. Vince was the head of security, the man who loved saying zero tolerance in all-hands meetings while quietly making exceptions for executives. And now his name was attached to an after-hours break glass edit that kept me labeled as responsible while stripping my ability to respond. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision made by adults who understood exactly what it could do to me. I didn't feel anger yet. I felt clarity. If they were willing to use break glass to rewrite governance artifacts, they were willing to use anything. And if something went wrong, and in payments, something always goes wrong, they already had the name they wanted to point at. Mine. So I did the only thing I could do without touching their systems. I forwarded everything to my attorney. Every screenshot, every timestamp, every entry, every voicemail saved but unplayed. Then I sat back and waited, not for an apology, but for the moment their strategy would collide with reality. Because code doesn't care about HR. Auditors don't care about titles. And when a regulated system fails, the first question is always the same. Who owned it? The first time I heard the word leverage in my own situation, it didn't feel like power. It felt like weight. Nadia, the attorney I'd hired that afternoon, didn't ask me how I felt. She asked me what I could prove. What time were you terminated? Late morning, HR said effective immediately. What time did your access die? I watched the lockout happen while I was still at my desk. Do you have timestamps? Yes. Good, she said. Then we're not arguing about emotions, we're arguing about a record. That night, while my old company kept generating incident alerts with my name attached, Nadia drafted a letter, addressed to their general counsel, and copied to compliance leadership. Not dramatic, not threatening, just a clean chronology. Termination meeting occurred on Tuesday late morning. Access revoked during or immediately after that meeting. Governance artifacts continued to list me as owner for regulated systems after termination. Break glass access was used to edit those artifacts after my termination was already in motion. I performed no work and had no access post-termination. Any attempt to represent me as responsible after termination was inaccurate. We attached screenshots of the ownership report, the audit entries, and the lockout. Nadia added one line that mattered more than any insult I could have thrown. Well, please preserve all logs and communications related to governance artifacts, break glass approvals, and production changes relevant to this matter. Preserve. Because companies that plan to blame someone also plan to clean up what makes them look guilty. We sent it around midnight. I slept maybe 2 hours. The next morning, I woke up with that hollow feeling you get after a night where your brain never stopped running. My phone was on my nightstand, face down like it could bite. There were no new incident emails, no alerts, no calls. Just quiet. For a second, I thought it meant they'd fixed it. Then my inbox refreshed, and a single message appeared from their general counsel, Paul, timestamped early morning. Ethan, we acknowledge receipt of your counsel's letter. We are reviewing the matter. Please do not contact any employees directly. We will follow up. That tone shift was immediate. Gone was Trent's casual, quick call. Gone was HR's soft scripting. This was legal language, clipped and controlled. And then right under it, another email arrived, from HR again. Subject, property return and confirmation. They wanted my signed confirmation that I hadn't accessed systems after termination. They also wanted me to list any company data I might possess. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach turn. They weren't just trying to correct the record. They were trying to frame the record. If I replied the wrong way, even once, they could twist it into, he admitted he had data. He admitted he could access. He admitted he was involved. I didn't answer. I forwarded it to Nadia. Within minutes, she sent back a short response for me to copy and paste. I had no access to company systems following termination. I have retained no company data. All further communication should be directed to counsel. I sent it exactly as written. Then the call started. Trent first, from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Ethan, he said, voice suddenly friendly. We're getting questions. Just need you to confirm a couple things. 15 minutes. That's it. We can pay you as a contractor. Then another voicemail landed, and it wasn't friendly. This is Vince Larkin, the voice said, head of security. If you accessed internal systems after termination or retained company information, you are exposing yourself to legal action. Return all data immediately. It was a threat dressed like a policy reminder. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen again. I saved the files, labeled them by time, and put them in the same folder as everything else. Because I finally understood the pattern. One hand offers a deal, the other hand holds a knife. Either way, they want you moving on their terms. But that was just the beginning. Around midday, I got a message from Lila, the staff SRE I trusted. Not on Slack. She texted my personal number. Short, cautious. Security is asking who used break glass last night. People are tense. That one sentence hit harder than any voicemail. If security was asking questions, it meant the break glass usage wasn't normal. It meant the incident trail had become visible to people who couldn't ignore it. I didn't know it yet, but the next email would change what this was really about. It came from Carla, but not directly to me. She emailed Nadia. Subject, external inquiry. Her message was short, and it read like someone trying to stay professional while standing in smoke. We have received preliminary questions from the audit firm regarding named ownership for payment orchestration and customer ledger. Please confirm your client has not been responsible for these systems since termination. Nadia replied within minutes. Confirmed. He has had no access since termination and has performed no work. Any documentation listing him as owner after termination is inaccurate. Carla's reply arrived fast. Understood. We are escalating. That was the first moment I felt something crack in my chest. In a good way. Not relief, not peace, but a shift. Because now the story wasn't controlled by Trent. It wasn't controlled by HR. It had entered the compliance channel, and compliance doesn't accept "trust me" as evidence. I opened the audit portal again and dug deeper into the break glass entry. Not just who approved it, but why it had been unlocked. The reason field was filled in, and it made my jaw tighten. Governance update required for audit continuity. Audit continuity, that was the excuse. Not production emergency, not customer impact. A governance update using the emergency account, after hours, with 2 executive approvals. They had treated break glass like a crowbar for paperwork, and they had done it to keep my name in place while stripping my email like a tag they could point at when things went wrong. I pulled every related entry I could find. The approvals, the time, the IP range, the system note that showed it happened after my termination ticket was opened. Then I did something I hadn't done since the conference room. I let myself feel it. Not anger. Anger is loud and obvious. I felt the break. The realization. I'd spent years building systems that forced accountability. I'd argued for logs, for controls, for ownership mapping, for the boring governance nobody thanks you for. And the moment my job became inconvenient, the same people who mocked those controls used them like weapons. My hands shook for the first time since Tuesday. I had to step away from the laptop and grip the edge of the counter until it passed. Then it did. And when it did, I saw the situation clearly. They needed me silent. They needed my name to stay attached long enough for them to survive the audit questions. And if anything failed in the meantime, they needed a scapegoat with a clean label already printed in the binder. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Not in the system. Not in the paperwork. Not in the evidence. I didn't re-enter their network. I didn't touch their code. I didn't help. I just kept collecting the truth as it appeared. That afternoon, Paul emailed again. The tone was more careful now. We are working to correct ownership records. Please refrain from further commentary. We will provide an update. No denial. No accusation. Just correct. That was a micro win, and I took it for what it was. Confirmation that they knew the record was wrong. But the silence that followed felt strange. No more calls from Trent. No more HR emails. No more threats from Vince. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you get right before a system breaks, when everyone is staring at dashboards and pretending they still have control. I closed my laptop, sat on the edge of my couch, and watched my phone like it was an unexploded device. Because in a company that runs money through code, silence doesn't mean safety. Sometimes it means they're about to push a change anyway. And when they do, the first name the world will see is still the one they left behind. Mine. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. It happened on Friday, late afternoon, when executives love to push small fixes because fewer people are watching, and weekend downtime makes every decision feel less accountable. At 4:11, my personal inbox refreshed. and an email landed that shouldn't have been able to reach me anymore. Subject: SEV1, Payments Degradation, Incident Bridge. The old incident distribution list was still forwarding to my personal address from years ago. I'd forgotten it existed. They hadn't. They just hadn't cleaned it up. Another email hit. Customer ledger mismatch detected. Then another. Potential data exposure. Escalate to legal. My stomach went tight, not because I missed the chaos, but because I understood what those words meant to the outside world. A fintech can survive latency. It doesn't survive ledger mismatch. I didn't click the bridge link. I didn't join the call. Nadia's rule was absolute. No work, no advice, no involvement that could be twisted into, he touched it. But I did what I'd done since Tuesday. I documented. I opened the audit portal and filtered by the systems tied to payments orchestration. Routing rules, retry logic configuration, the break glass unlock ledger. My eyes scanned the entries the way they used to scan error traces, looking for the first bad decision, the place where the timeline bends. There it was. Break glass unlocked at 406. Approvals: Trent Halloway and Vince Larkin again. Reason: urgent hotfix. Customer impact. 4 minutes later, a config change hit the routing layer. Someone adjusted the retry backoff values. Someone also changed the circuit breaker behavior. Those are the kinds of tweaks that look harmless in a pull request and catastrophic in production when traffic is high. At 4:13, the payment gateway latency spiked. At 4:16, automated retries multiplied the load like gasoline. At 4:20, the system started dropping transactions in uneven bursts. Enough to make customers call, not enough to immediately reveal the pattern. Then came the email that made my hands go cold. From a junior engineer on the incident chain, who is the service owner who can approve rollback? And a reply from someone higher up, short, confident, and wrong. Owner, Ethan Cole. I stared at that line until the letters blurred, because I was sitting in my apartment, not employed, locked out, and still being named as the person who should approve a rollback in a regulated payment system. That one sentence was the entire strategy in plain sight. If the incident worsened, they could say, we couldn't get approval because the owner wasn't responding. If money went missing, they could say, the system was under his ownership. If auditors asked why governance failed, they could say, we had an owner. He was listed. My name wasn't a mistake. It was a shield. I forwarded the email chain to Nadia with no commentary, just the forwarded thread and the timestamp. My phone rang less than a minute later. Company number, General Counsel, I answered, because this time it wasn't Trent. It wasn't HR. It was the one person whose job was to prevent exactly this. Legal. Ethan, Paul said, and his voice was tight. We are in an active incident. Your name is still listed as owner in governance records. We need you to confirm immediately that you are not involved. I have already confirmed in writing, I replied. My voice surprised me. It was calm. Twice. I understand, he said quickly. But auditors are copied on the incident thread now. They are asking questions in real time. Send the request in writing, I said. Exact wording, and I will respond. A beat of silence. Then, we're trying to resolve this quickly. So am I said, by keeping it factual. An email arrived while we were still on the phone. Please confirm you did not access, modify, or approve any production changes after termination. I replied with one sentence. I had no access after termination and have performed no work. Any post-termination changes occurred without my involvement or authorization. Then I stopped. No extra words, no help. On the incident chain, the situation got worse. A partner contact replied, asking if they should halt processing. A customer support manager wrote that calls were spiking. Someone from finance asked whether settlements would be delayed. Those messages weren't technical. They were the beginning of reputational damage. Then the audit firm chimed in. Not with sympathy, with questions. Please explain why a terminated employee remains listed as responsible owner for a regulated service. Please provide evidence of access revocation and governance record correction. Please explain break glass usage in relation to governance artifacts. Those are the kinds of questions that don't get answered on an incident bridge. They get answered in board meetings. At 7:42, Carla emailed Nadia again. Subject: Board escalation. Her message was short and clinical. Board Audit Committee has called an emergency session tonight. External auditors will attend. We will require your client's evidence package. Nadia replied, "We can provide documentation under privilege. We also require immediate correction of any records listing him as owner." Carla answered one line. Agreed. That was the micro-catharsis. Not the final victory, but the first undeniable reversal. Because now the board knew. The board knew my name was sitting where it shouldn't be, and that break glass had been used with executive approvals to keep it there. And boards have one reflex stronger than greed: self-preservation. At 8:20, Trent texted me, not email, text. Like we were still on friendly terms, like he hadn't watched security escort me out. "Ethan, please, just tell us the rollback steps. We're bleeding. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I read it and felt something harden inside my chest. He wasn't asking because he respected me. He was asking because he needed my competence to save him from the mess he created. I screenshot it, saved it. Didn't respond. Then Vince texted, one line. "Do not distribute internal materials. This is your final warning." Final warning? As if I was a child. As if my name hadn't been distributed into their audit binder by their own systems. I didn't respond to him either. At 9:30, another email from Paul arrived, marked confidential. They were placing Trent on administrative leave, pending review. They were appointing an interim incident commander. They were correcting governance records, effective immediately. No apology, no admission, but the correction itself was an admission. Because you don't correct something that was never wrong. At 10:15, Carla sent a separate note. Ownership map updated. Incident distribution list cleaned. Evidence received. Thank you. I sat back and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since Tuesday. It wasn't satisfaction yet. It was the feeling of a trap failing to close. But the night still had one more turn, and it was the one that made the entire company panic. A formal notice came in from the payment processor partner. If the company could not demonstrate proper governance and change control, they would suspend processing until remediation was verified. Not a fine, not a slap on the wrist, a shutdown. That would have killed revenue by Monday morning. And suddenly, my termination wasn't a small HR event. It was now tangled up in their ability to keep the lights on. Paul called again. His voice had changed. No edge, no authority, just urgency. "We need to resolve this," he said. "You have documentation. You have influence. What do you want?" I stared at the severance packet still sitting on my table, unsigned, like a bad joke. I spoke carefully because this is where people talk themselves into losing. "I want my name removed from every system and document, effective the moment you terminated me," I said. "I want a written statement confirming I am not responsible for any post-termination changes, and I want an amended severance agreement, mutual non-disparagement, and correction of the performance language." Silence. Then Paul exhaled and said, "We will review." "Good," I replied, "tonight." Because for the first time, they weren't negotiating from comfort. They were negotiating from fear. And fear makes companies tell the truth faster than ethics ever will. By Sunday evening, the entire tone of the company had changed. No more quick sync. No more just hop on a call. No more threats about legal exposure. Everything became what it should have been from the start. Written, time-stamped, and carefully worded. Because now the people in charge were afraid of the record. Nadia handled the negotiation. My job was simple. Stay consistent, stay silent, and let paper do the talking. Early Saturday morning, Paul emailed an updated draft statement. It wasn't an apology. It was something more useful than an apology. A fact pattern. It said in plain language, my employment ended on Tuesday, late morning. My access was revoked at that time. I did not access, modify, approve, or deploy anything after termination. Any governance artifacts listing me as owner after termination were inaccurate. Those artifacts had now been corrected. Nadia tightened the wording so there was no wiggle room. No, to the best of our knowledge. No, it appears. Just clean, auditable sentences. Then she attached our terms. Not vengeance, not fantasy. Real corporate terms that matched the real harm they'd tried to create. 6 months, severance instead of 2. Payment within 5 business days. Mutual non-disparagement, not one-way silence. A neutral reference letter confirming my title and dates of employment. A written correction stating the termination was role elimination, not performance. And the clause I cared about most. They had to certify, in writing, that my name had been removed as owner, approver, and escalation contact from every system and governance artifact, including distribution lists, run books, ownership maps, evidence binder exports, third-party contacts, and incident routing rules. Because money is temporary. A name attached to a regulated system is permanent in the wrong hands. Paul tried to negotiate that clause down. He called it overly broad. Nadia's response was calm and lethal. If it is overly broad, she wrote, it is because your client allowed the name to propagate broadly. Correcting it is remediation. Carla from compliance backed us in writing. We can certify, she said. We should certify. That single sentence told me the internal fight had shifted. Compliance wasn't defending Trent anymore. They were protecting the company from itself. Saturday afternoon, another message came through, this one from the audit committee chair, not to me directly, to Nadia. They wanted the evidence package under privilege, the screenshots, the audit log exports, the voicemails, the emails showing my name on the incident thread, the break glass approval records. Nadia delivered it in a structured folder with an index, because that's what boards understand. Not stories, packages. By late Saturday night, Trent was officially suspended pending investigation. Vince was recused from anything related to the incident and governance controls, which is corporate language for sit down and stop touching things. And the payment processor partner? They agreed not to suspend processing on one condition. The company had to demonstrate corrected governance, documented approvals, and an external review of break glass policy within 10 business days, which meant my name had to be gone from every artifact before Monday. They moved fast when revenue was on the line. Sunday morning, Carla sent the first certification draft. It was a plain PDF with a table. System, artifact, action, timestamp. Performed by, verified by compliance. Payments, orchestrator, ownership map. Updated owner role, timestamp. Incident routing, remove personal escalation, timestamp. Distribution list forwarding rules, remove personal email, timestamp. Run book contact section, replace named owner with role mailbox, timestamp. Compliance binder generator, updated mapping source, timestamp. Third-party processor technical contact, updated to compliance shared mailbox, timestamp. I read it line by line like it was a contract, because it was. It was the company admitting, in the only language that matters, that I had been left attached after termination. Then Carla added a second page. Verification steps. How they confirmed there were no remaining references in repositories, wikis, incident tooling, and ticketing. She didn't write, sorry, but she wrote something that meant more. This is corrected. Nadia sent back one final round of edits. Then we signed. The severance hit my account on Thursday, exactly on time. I didn't celebrate. I paid off 2 debts, moved the rest into savings, and closed the chapter like an adult. The reference letter arrived the same day. One page. Neutral. Clean. Useful. It confirmed my title, tenure, and that I left due to role elimination. No performance smear, no quiet poison. 2 weeks later, I heard through an old colleague what happened after the dust settled. Trent's suspension turned into termination after the internal review. The reason was policy violations, which is what companies say when they can't deny the logs. Vince didn't get fired. Security leaders rarely do. But he resigned quietly the next month. No announcement, no farewell. Just gone, replaced by someone who didn't treat break glass like a private key for executives. The board hired an external firm to review governance controls. They rewrote the process so owners were roles, not individuals. They forced approvals to route through compliance, not managers. They made break glass require a documented incident number every time. All the controls I'd begged for when it was inconvenient. And the strangest part? I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt calm. Because the thing I feared most wasn't losing my job. It was being blamed for something I didn't do, with my name printed in the wrong place at the wrong time. They tried to leave my name behind like a decoy. Instead, the record followed them. A month later, I started at a new company. Smaller, quieter, less obsessed with optics. During onboarding, the CTO showed me their incident run books and asked if anything jumped out. I opened the ownership section and froze for a second. No names, only roles. Payments owner, platform on-call lead. Approver, engineering manager, platform. Compliance contact. Risk officer. That was how it should have been all along. I looked up at him and said, "Whoever designed this learned the hard way." He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded like he already understood. When people ask me now if I regret not helping during the incident, I tell them the truth. I didn't owe them labor after they fired me. I owed myself a clean record, so I didn't plead. I didn't beg. I didn't fix their mess. I let their own log speak. Because revenge isn't chaos. It isn't screaming. It isn't burning bridges for the thrill. Sometimes revenge is just refusing to carry someone else's liability. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's evidence. And sometimes the most satisfying ending is the quietest one. My name was finally removed, not erased, released. And for the first time since Tuesday, I could breathe like the system no longer depended on me.